I'm obviously delighted and excited to be here. And thank you to Mr. Joe. That was fantastic. Sorry, I kind of barged in a little bit. It wasn't intentional on Maslow's slide. It was just serendipitous. I loved everything that I heard you say, though, Joe. That was fantastic. What I'm going to do through kind of, again, a little bit more serendipity is totally carry on what Joe's talking about, because he's absolutely on the money. When you've heard me talk in the past, you would have heard me say very similar things about validity, check the source, go backwards, all of this stuff. What I'm going to do today is give you some tools, a big tool that helps you kind of operationalize everything that Joe has just said. I'm going to give you a lens that allows you to test ideas, whether it's Maslow or anything else, to see, does this thing work with my audience or audiences? Okay, so welcome to hypothesis testing for everyone. Okay, Joe's absolutely spot on. Be skeptical. Everyone's talking garbage. Test it. So I'm going to give you the testing bit. Okay, so Joe actually set me up perfectly. Before we go into this, I just want to cover a couple of things. So I was writing notes whilst Joe was going on, not to criticize him, but can I kind of support him. By the way, I'm an INTJ some days and an ENFP. And again, if you've heard me talk about personality psychology before, I hate Myers-Briggs. We all hate Myers-Briggs. It's archaic Jungian crap. Number two, don't talk to people. Watch their behavior. I've said that before because what people say and what they do are usually totally different things. When you hear people talking about polls and surveys, walk away. There are definitely times to do that stuff. Don't get me wrong. If you have the opportunity to watch their behavior first, do that. With regards to Maslow, yes, it's bollocks. But the core message of user needs being central to everybody and user research is 100% valid. Stick with that. Brilliant. And finally, Mr. Joe, I'd love to do a one-on-one with you and get it sort of televised or whatever this thing is, because there's so much we can get into. Anyway, hypothesis testing for everyone. Let me just go through my slides rapido. This is me. I'm the noisy guy on LinkedIn, as Luke really just said. That's where I tend to live. I'm a little bit on Twitter, but that's where you'll find me. This is me in a nutshell. For those of you who haven't seen me rant and rave before, I just wanted to kind of credentialize myself just a little bit, but I don't want to overplay this. That's just where I've been. The bits you'll probably find really interesting are the psychology and HCI bits that are in there. If you want to, again, go validate this yourself on LinkedIn. So what are we going to be covering today? And I'm going to be running till about 10:40-ish. So I've got about 15, 20 minutes to get going. We're going to be covering in that time, what is hypothesis testing? Who's it for? Working with product people, and how do you basically do it? Okay. The important thing to remember here is this is huge. This is massive. What Joe has been talking about and highlighting, shining a light into some very dark areas of psychology. There's some massive, massive benefits to you as a researcher, as a designer, as a UX person, as a product person. So quickly, what's in it for you? This is a tried and tested way about learning about stuff, our world in general. If you do it better, if you have a better method, you're going to learn better stuff. Now, that sounds screamingly obvious, but it's taken for granted. Learning better stuff makes you a better person. It'll raise your profile at work by leading the thinking. And that's obviously demonstrating your value, which is never a bad thing. And you get to build better things, which, again, is a better experience. It's more money for the organization. You have a better portfolio. Everything goes better, okay? And it all comes back to hypothesis testing, or to what Joe was saying, being skeptical. So this is you. And this is you. You go to a number of conferences. You do a lot of reading. You go to meetups, maybe some of the UX psychology meetups we've been running. And you get all these ideas. So there you are at Bad Conference. And you're sitting there at home, as we are this year, or in a big auditorium, as we are other years, and you're being exposed to all these myriad of ideas, of techniques. You're getting authors, you're getting tools, you're getting insight, methods, effects, and a myriad of other amazing things that you've already heard from Joe, that you're hearing from me, and that you'll hear throughout the course of today. But the problem arises is this. You get back to the office the next day, the next week, whenever it is. And, it's not as easy to apply all those things that you've learned at conference or in a book or a journal. And this is a real problem, a massive problem for our industry, because you guys, and I have been on a 2-track career, right? you have on one track, you have these things that you learn for yourself. And on the other track, you have things that you practice at work. Because as UX people, it's all about the experience. It's all about the practice. And if you don't get to practice the things that you learn, it extinguishes. It doesn't actually catch hold. You don't get to do it. It doesn't become a thing. And that is tragic. Okay. So what we need to do is to somehow have the things that you learn for yourself inform the things that you practice at work. Okay. Often, and I know lots of you, I can't see your faces right now. If we were in an auditorium, I would be kind of wryly smiling at this as your head of something or other has just outsourced your role and you don't get to practice that thing. And I know you're all laughing or crying at that because it happens all the time and it's tragic. So we need to fix that urgently. And that's one of the things I'm going to give to you today is hypothesis testing. What hypothesis testing does for you as an individual, as a professional, it brings these two things together, okay? It literally allows you to test ideas at work. So let's get into the word hypothesis very briefly. Don't be scared of the word hypothesis. Lots of people hear words like hypothesis and think it sounds sciencey. It sounds scary. It's not particularly approachable. So this is the easy answer. It's an idea. Okay, a hypothesis is just an idea. At the level we're talking about, that's completely fine. If we go off into ultra science, then yes, that's going to become a problem. But for our daily working lives, no one's going to slate you in your mind for thinking as of a hypothesis as an idea. And when you're sitting in conference, when you're reading stuff, when you're hearing speakers, all of these ideas are hypotheses. And they are hypotheses to be applied in your daily working life on projects and products. So if I'm just move forward. So this really, if we're talking about hypothesis testing, we're talking about idea testing. Okay. And that's completely achievable and understandable for literally everybody. Okay. Why? Because everybody has got ideas. Literally, you've got ideas. Sometimes they'll come to you in the shower, sometimes as you're falling asleep, maybe you're knee deep in Azure, or you're actually looking somebody in the eye in a user test or some kind of discovery research, and suddenly it's bing, oh yes. But then your boss will come to you and say, hey, I've got an idea. Let's use Maslow. Let's use Myers-Briggs. Your boss's boss will actually come to you and say, I know, let's do a 3,000-man poll. The client's got ideas. Every other department or role you're working with, all the way, and then your partner, some dude, some guy, some person. And then I put David Icke at the end. Now, why have I put David Icke at the end? This is the point I'm making there, is that not all ideas are good ideas, okay? So these are all hypotheses. These are all potential ways of doing stuff. Now, in our digital world of UX, we end up with ideas and users, because that's pretty much our world in a nutshell. There's stuff to do and the audiences that we're dealing with. So let's draw a line between them, because let's just do that. Now, and so I really wish I could see you all today, because, again, this should be relatively funny. What we think the world looks like is this. And those of you who are leads and seniors and who are longer in the tooth are probably laughing long and hard at this point, because this is kind of funny. This doesn't really exist that often. It's a bit of an academic kind of, laboratory thing. What the reality is it looks something like this. Marketing have got a large lion's share of access to users. There's UX and then there's R&D. But actually, the real world looks a bit more like this, in that you are a UXer sitting within a product team. Your marketing team or teams have got a myriad of agencies, and they work through that lens. And R&D is like this TARDIS-like kind of skunk works that you're not even allowed to look at without signing an NDA. So this is your route. This is where you are. You live here. And there's a lot of people competing for access to users through red tape and access and all kinds of stuff. That means you have to be efficient. That means you have to do things the right way. And one of those ways is hypothesis testing, because when you do get that opportunity to speak to users, you want to do it in a structured and informing learning way as is humanly possible. Now, again, if we're calling that access to users and we're calling that hypothesis testing, just break it down in your own mind into this. trying out a cool idea that I learned at Bad 2020 to see if it works for our users, right? And that's kind of the point that Joe was making. A lot of these insights that come out over psychological history, shall we say, might have worked in that particular context with those users, etc. What you need to do is to take anything that everyone says is facts and take it as a hypothesis and test it to see, does it work with your users? So do people with blue eyes buy more yogurt, or whatever that crazy hypothesis is? So what you're going to need to do is organize your ideas. Okay, you're going to get tons of ideas from lots of different places. You've got to organize them. But let's a synonym of that, another way of saying organizing your ideas, is actually managing your ideas. Okay, we cool with that? I think there's not a person that would say let's not organize our ideas or manage them. So let's go one teeny weeny step further. Let's just call that structure your hypotheses. Okay, makes perfect sense, super quick, super easy. Organize your ideas, structure your hypotheses. But what do I mean by structure? And don't get turned off. This isn't scary or horrible or difficult, okay? It's just putting some structure to your learning. There are two things I mean by this. I mean hypotheses and I mean inquiry. So let's look at structured hypotheses first. All I'm saying is put some syntax to it. So if I do something, something's going to happen. That's simple, okay? I have an idea that if I throw this pen at the window, it's going to bounce off of it or it's going to go through it. You know, you can go, or if I use Maslow, I'm going to sell more. If I do this, do that. So for example, if I make the call to action green, then more people will buy more. If I add a chat bot to the product page, then more people will be able to get help quicker and therefore buy more. Reasonable hypotheses and things that you've probably seen all day and all night. If you want to, you can structure it a bit further by putting an outcome on it. If I choose stock images with individuals not looking directly at the camera, then people will feel more comfortable on our website. I will know this to be true when time on page and or pages consumed increases from repeat visitors by at least 20%. Okay, should seem fairly familiar, that kind of a thing. Now, what I want you to be doing is sitting at Bad Conference or anywhere else in the world. You could be looking at the news, you could be reading a journal paper or reading a book and get an idea. Start thinking about how you translate that into your product or your service as a hypothesis statement like this. Then the second part of structure, is structured inquiry. And this is massive, okay? If you're going to take anything away from today and from my little part of Bad Conference this year, I think this is probably front and center. Structuring your learning activity will change your life, okay? How do you learn about stuff? On the left here, we have unstructured. Now, this is a team of people who have an idea. Great. And they formulated their hypothesis. I think that if I wear Nike shoes, I will run faster. Silly this. Okay. And it failed. Well, okay. I thought, well, if I want to run faster, I ate bananas. If I eat bananas, I will run faster. Hypothesis 2. That failed. I will run faster if I have the wind behind me. Hypothesis 3 also failed. Okay, those are three really unstructured, really wild hypotheses that don't relate to each other. And that's basically a stab in the dark. And we see this all day, all night in digital. This is our world. It has to change. It is broken. We must stop people doing this. It's embarrassing, but they don't even know that they're doing it. So there's a better way of doing this. And on the right-hand side, it's all about structure. Okay, so let's say my hypothesis was, we'll take it again. If I eat bananas, I will run faster. Okay, it failed. Hypothesis number 2 was, if I put the wind behind me, I will run faster. Okay, that didn't work either. What you might do, the difference with the structured here is that I'm actually pivoting around a single factor. So I might just say, if I wear Nike shoes, I don't run faster. But if I wear Reebok shoes, I do run faster, whereas the manufacturer of shoes is the factor. Okay, I hope that's making sense. If it's not making sense, please ask in the questions because I will explain this through more. It should be pretty obvious, or I hope I'm making it obvious, that if you fail something, you need to pivot around a certain factor. Now, if you're more scientifically driven, talking about controls and those sorts of things is really what I'm broadly talking around. But this is really about having a structured investigation, because if you do it on the left-hand side, you're effectively guessing. Okay? You're guessing, and that's not okay. That's very far from okay. But if you're doing it on the right-hand side, you're learning. Okay? Even when you're failing, you're learning. And that's massive. Joe even talked about that, okay? If you learn that drinking coffee doesn't make you smarter, great. That's learning. That's progress. I'm not going to continue my research down that route. So that's absolutely massive. I'm just going to have to keep moving just because of time. It's this structure from hypothesis testing that changes you and your team and your business into this learning machine. And too many times we're not learning machines. We're these shoot in the dark, guessing at stuff, and it's bad. And I know many of you guys will know this already, but we need to start educating upwards in the entities that we're working in. So some top tips: break your ideas down into manageable hypotheses. Okay, don't go trying to boil the ocean, as people are talking about. Investigate one thing at one time. Don't be overambitious, and importantly, repeat your hypotheses with different samples. Okay, so just speaking to John, Paul, George, and Ringo ain't gonna do it. You need to speak to another 4, another 4, another 4. If you want to do cascading, speak to 20, 20, 20. Repeat your hypotheses and validate your insight. The next big point is varying your hypotheses. Okay, so trying something a little differently to see if it works any better. So if coffee didn't work, does tea work for making me run faster? What about Ribena? Let's try some cold drinks. Do you see where are we going here? We're not just trying, I'm wearing a different tracksuit or running on a different track. I'm varying the beverage and the effect that it had on my performance. Now, here's a quick kind of taxonomy of factors, shall we say? Okay, so let's say your boss's boss, some guy has said to you, call to actions are very important for sales on an e-commerce page. You're going to come up with some hypotheses as to how we might optimize the call to action styling. One of which is color, one of those factors. You can have hue, saturation, or luminosity. You can have red, green, blue variables. There's lots and lots of stuff you can look at within color. There's tons and tons of variables. Likewise, you can change the shape of it, rounded or square. Okay, you can rounded edge or square, or you can have it at the top of the page, at the bottom of the page, or kind of top and tailed. There's lots of ways you can vary your hypothesis to say, okay, if I made my call to action green, sorry, those are squirrels on my roof. If I make the call to action green and it fails, then what happens if I make it a lighter green, a darker green, a more saturated green? What if it isn't green? What if it's blue? Let's try a saturated blue. What if it's blue but rounded? Can you see where I'm starting to come from? Vary those hypotheses and don't just jump wildly into something completely different because it failed. If you try something slightly different, it might well work. Some tips here. Be agile about it. By the way, Luke and organizers, can somebody give me a boot when I've got about 5 minutes left so I don't muck up or overrun? Thank you very much. So top tips: be agile about it, learn small, fail fast, iterate quickly. Okay, this fails if you try to take too big a bite. Okay, don't try to take too big a bite. Start small, stay small, be efficient. That's the best way to do this stuff. Then how is this going to work on your agile team? This is a really important thing because most of us are working on agile teams these days, and you want to be able to get your ideas into that cycle, into that testing. So how might this work for you? This is your product team. This is on a 2-week sprint cycle, which is usually typical. Week 1 is discovery. Week 2 is testing. I often call it validation, and that's a really not a great term, but it does convey what the intention is, i.e. 1 is you're learning about stuff and 1 is you're testing it. So what does that look like? Week 1, you've got all these ideas that you get from speaking to people. How are you finding our service? How can we improve it? If I gave you a magic wand, all of that stuff. Generating hypotheses, which you're organizing and formalizing. In the middle, you got the prototyping, where your interaction designer or yourself is azuring like a pro, or if you're in GDS, you're cutting code. And in the second week, we're out and about again. Does it work? Does what we built, the idea that we built into the prototype, does it work? We get to test the hypothesis, all within a 2-week cycle. So what that means is you get an idea validated in 2 weeks. Fantastically powerful. Then we go into sprint 2, and we carry on as normal. This is standard GDS stuff. So for all of you government researchers, I know this is old hat to you, but this is a fantastic way of working. It works. We all know it works. I'm just sharing it with the wider audience. So then we take this 2-track. You have your product team and your build team, your dev team. Product team works 1 week or 1 sprint, ahead of the dev team. Why? Because we are validating ideas in a 2-week cycle. So that means we're able to pass over to build validated ideas. That's phenomenally powerful. It's quicker, better, everything. So what you're doing is you're passing these validated ideas through to your dev teams, and then moving back into discovery, validating it, handing it over, and repeat. Very powerful, very effective. So managing your research activity. I'm going to try and summarize things quickly now because I'm trying to get through. Got 5 minutes left. Brilliant. Thank you, Luke. Okay, so ideas, hypotheses, and insight into your persona decks. Okay, I'm going to brush through this quite quickly. Let's say you've got your sports-obsessed dad persona, one of your many personas, and this accounts for about half of your users this year. You might have had tons of ideas you've learned at conference. I want to do a personalized landing page. I might want to learn what their primary sport is. Is it rugby, cricket, golf, what have you? Or what is the effect of having a team badge? This is a really tribal, passionate kind of an audience. What might symbolism have an effect on their behavior? Similarly, you'll have hypotheses. If we show the user's favorite club badge on the call to action, we'll see more sales. Well, actually, you might have failed that one in Sprint 14. Fair enough. So what did you do? Like any good researcher, you pivoted. So you pivoted here in some sprints, a few sprints later. If we show the user's favorite club badge on the order summary page this time, not the call to action, we will see more sales and less bounce. And then you might put your insights in here. So showing the latest scores in the banner increased scroll depth by 25% for new users. Now, you're going to have to develop more hypotheses to understand why that's happening. Is increased scroll depth because they're more engaged, or they're trying to find something they're lost? Sorry, that moved on without me doing that. Unless you're trying to get me done quickly. So here's your persona. I've talked about this a lot. We've got ideas, hypotheses, and insights stored on the right-hand side there, user journeys and needs and pain points all in there. Remember, it's your persona to store your insights, but please store your hypotheses and the outcomes from them. So putting it all together, you have an idea. You're inspired at the bad conference. You write a hypothesis, or you write a number of hypotheses to explore that idea. And then you might structure it. How do we investigate this one hypothesis at a time? Then you pivot, you vary your hypotheses to see if you can find that sweet spot, that optimal point, and store everything in your personas. Most importantly, share, share, share. You will have heard me say this time and time again. You've got to share. If you don't share, you might as well not have done this work. You won't move the needle. You won't transform. You won't change consciousness or revenues or anything good. Sharing is critical. It's going to show that you're becoming a more scientific, evidence-based practice. And that's nothing but good for yourself and your company. It looks kind of like this. Idea, hypothesis, structure, variation, storage, and sharing. And finally, UX psychology. If you've been following me and lots of the people that you're going to be seeing talking today, we're all talking in UX psychology terms, okay? For those of you that's new to it, look up me on YouTube, look up an introduction to UX psychology, and you'll see everything you need there in a 25-minute video, which kind of introduces everything. But effectively, the future of UX, and this is my personal opinion, the future of UX involves developing a deep behavioral understanding of our users' needs from multiple sources, and everything from direct observation to machine learning and everything in between. UX psychology seeks to develop psychology knowledge and practices within UX or within digital, within product, to support this behaviorally centric future. People can draw stuff all they want, or they can do all that rubbish market research. We don't care about them. We're moving in this direction. If you want to join Meetups, there are Meetups running in 3 different countries. I'm running them in the UK, although I need to get my arse in gear. David DeCipio has cultivated a massive and very successful Australian contingent down there. And Mark Drexler is working his butt off to get Germany going. So between the 3 of us, we are working really hard to try to get Meetups and to get this level of consciousness raised across the industry. Please follow me, follow these guys, and get involved, and you'll find out when the next one is in your area. That's it. Questions. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that's useful to you. Between what Joe has said and what I've just said, you should have the motivation and the tools now to go out there and use all this rich psychological insight for your goals, for your business, for your products. Thank you very much.